Hi gang, I just wanted to go over in a little more detail some of the challenges and decisions we need to make around audio in the iBook authors format. There's basically two ways that we could embed audio into a book. So here's a typical, this is a two-column layout page. I'm just going up to widgets here. If I go under widgets, I have two options. One is media and the other is Keynote, which are pertinent here. Those are the two ways we can get audio content into the book. So I'm just going to click on media. And you'll notice that this square opens. It's got a figure number there, and I can caption it, and I can put a title on it and stuff. But there's also the square in the middle there where the video would play. Well, with audio, of course, we don't have a video track. So what goes in that square? It's an M4V file, so it could be a series of slides that go in here. It could be a single image, it could be an icon, it could be an icon representing the podcast, or it could be an icon representing audio, like a little speaker or something. You know, those are the kinds of choices we need to make and think through, not only from an aesthetic point of view, but also from a time constraint point of view. Like, it's one thing to just drop an MP3 file in here and it'll play. It's another to start adding photographs to it or turning it into a sound slideshow or something. That's going to take more time. And if you're dealing with a lot of audio, that's more time all the time, every time you do that. So you really need to think through that. So the other option here is to do it via Keynote. So Keynote, I'm just going to embed that, allows us to drop a Keynote presentation. Now, a Keynote presentation, each slide can contain audio. So again, we could just make a simple slide in Keynote with the audio on it, drop it in here. That image could be, again, an icon representing audio, or it could be a picture representing the podcast series, or whatever. You know, we need to sort of think through that and drop it in here. So those are the two options. Each of them offer their own constraints, and we need to sort of play with that and think about it. And of course, you know, the other thing is you can change the size of this. So it doesn't need to be this big. It could be this big, and you know, you can fit it where you want to fit it. The other challenge, which I think is a more interesting one to sort of think through, is the sort of usability aspect of audio in a book. So suppose this was a podcast that was 20 minutes long. So think about going through this book on the tablet, and you come to this, and you've got this podcast, and I would presume somehow we'd indicate the length of that podcast. So you say, this is a 20-minute podcast. So the usability question and the practical question is, what are you doing? You know, are you going to stop reading through the book and listen to that 20-minute podcast, or what? You know, and so we need to think about that, because it might be, for example, that we give a sampler of the podcast here and then make the podcast available elsewhere in the book, that if you want to go and listen to it. Or it may be, as we experiment, we find that it's practical to listen to the podcast while you're flipping through the rest of the book. You know, probably not ideal in terms of listening to the podcast, but depending on the kind of podcast, maybe if it's music or something, it might be the case that makes perfect sense. You know, so it's sort of a nice little ambient track to what you're reading, if that works well as an experience. So that's why it's so important to sort of think this through really carefully, not only from a functional point of view of the software, what the software is capable of, and how we aesthetically want to present audio in the book, but also from the point of view of thinking through the usability of it. Like, what is the practical use of audio in this book, and what's the optimal way to provide people with the best experience they can get for listening to those podcasts and absorbing what's in those podcasts and paying attention to what's in those podcasts as they go through this book and explore this book. So just some thoughts that I wanted to kick around. I'm also going to share this with Meredith and Wendy, because they'll have valuable input here as well, thinking through the experience of using audio in the iBook author format. And I think it's just a good example of the kinds of choices, journalistic choices and usability choices, that we're going to be faced with as we design this content experience for our users. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.